we're on Mackenzie Avenue, and when businesses started moving up here to be closer to the station, a lot of them were actually locating right on the road to the station. So there were several business buildings there. There was Bourne Brothers store that later relocated to what's now the Style Trend. There was C.B. Hume that relocated to the building where the Royal Bank is now. And so that was where people started to build. But then there was starting to be some construction on Mackenzie Avenue. And this is a photograph that was taken in 1898. And it's not really recognizable so much as Revelstoke. You can see, there's a mountain there, but it's burnt off. It's obvious it's not Revelstoke, but there's no trees there. It's very, very dirt. It's not even really a fully graded road. There's big piles of dirt over on this corner, which would be approximately like where the flower store and the kids store are now. There's just not a lot of things built on there yet. It was just starting to really be developed as the downtown. You can actually see a church spire in here. That was at the corner where the Royal Bank is now. The church was built there in 1893, and then it was moved in 1900 to the corner of 5th and Mackenzie. And they moved buildings all the time around here. It's very common practice. When you look closely in here, you can also see that there's several houses, and the houses were all eventually moved out when it became clear that this was going to be more of a commercial street. So this was just the early formation of Mackenzie Avenue. And Mackenzie was named the same as Mount Mackenzie, where Revelstoke Mountain Resort is. They were both named after Alexander Mackenzie, who was the second Prime Minister of Canada. Because of the Canadian Pacific Railway and their strong ties to the Government of Canada, a lot of the place names here were from Dominion names. They're from Prime Ministers and the Fathers of Confederation. So that's where a lot of the early place names came from. So very, very rough town at that point. Mostly all frame buildings at that time. And then we flip over. So that's 1898. This was probably taken around 1912. Same street. And just a complete transformation. This is recognizable as Revelstoke, even though some of those buildings are no longer here. But you can tell that looking at that's Revelstoke. So it really, once the decision was made to make this the main downtown street, it really did transform fairly quickly. The other thing about the Mackenzie Avenue when it was developed is that it originally went right out to Victoria Road. So this is showing the railway tracks, and this building would be just in the parking lot on that side of the street. And then there's buildings right out to the street on that side as well. They were, and even around the corner as well. So it was built right up. That changed. There was fires on that side in 1914. And then a fire on this side in 1916 that took down a lot of those buildings. And then also in 1916 a fire took down an old brick building where this building is now, what's now Chubby Funsters. So maybe in the normal scheme of things, those buildings may have been rebuilt, but it was just as the World War I was starting, and there was growth was kind of stopped in Revelstoke. Up until that time, Revelstoke had really been in a boom, but it really kind of slowed things down, and those buildings were never rebuilt. Some of the individual buildings, I made mention of Chubby Funsters and how that had replaced actually two other buildings that had been in that location. That's actually one of the later buildings on the block. It was built there in about 1929 as the CP Telecommunications Office. So it was a telegraph office in there. And it was still operating in that function until the 1980s, I believe. And then since then it's been operating as a restaurant. So that's why it's got the slightly different look. It's more that Art Deco style.